Two Swedish brothers who dreamt of becoming game developers. An ambitious game that left them on the verge of bankruptcy, and a horde of angry fans who wanted their money back. This is the story of Payday, the series that deserved better. It's 1997. The Swedish brothers Ulf and Bo Anderson had just started the Grin game studio, pursuing the dream of becoming PC and arcade game developers, with their first release being Ballistics in 2001. Over time, Grin started to find some footing in the industry, going on to release several more titles of their own and even working on 2 Ghost Recon titles for Ubisoft. But just as things were looking bright for the studio, Square Enix reached out to them in 2008, commissioning them to develop a spin-off for the Final Fantasy franchise called Fortress, an offer that Square Enix themselves couldn't follow through. 6 months later, right after Grin invested an insane amount of resources into Fortress, Square Enix reclaimed the project from them without a paycheck, putting them under so much financial pressure that just 6 months afterwards, Grin had to close off for good. But the Anderson brothers weren't going to give up so easily. The duo founded the Overkill software studio on the same year. They had one more chance to establish their brand, and this time, they wanted to make games that they themselves would play. They were big fans of heist movies like Heat and Die Hard, and also loved games with a lot of replay value. So in 2011, they mixed all of their interests together and released Payday the Heist. To say this game was a genius idea from them would be an understatement. Building on the formula of Left 4 Dead, which was very popular at the time, Payday was a 4-player heist simulator, having the players commit major robberies while fighting hordes of police officers and occasionally special enemies. They would rob a bank, a diamond vault, a slaughterhouse, and much more. Even though the core gameplay felt unpolished and there was a severe lack of content, the core concept was so fun and the replay value was so high that the players simply looked past it. After all, Payday the Heist was made on the Diesel engine, which was designed specifically for racing games, so a bit of jankiness was to be expected. Payday's popularity grew by the day, eventually crossing over with the Left 4 Dead franchise and releasing the No Mercy Heist specifically on PC, during which the players would steal a sample of a virus from the Mercy Hospital, a prominent location in the Left 4 Dead franchise. This made Payday break out of its niche, finding its way into the Left 4 Dead fanbase, being discussed for its potential connection to the franchise. As of 2012, Payday the Heist had sold over 700,000 copies and showed the way to future for the Anderson brothers. Even though the two wanted to cash in on the success of their game with a sequel, they were lacking the necessary funds. So they did some digging and reached out to Starbreeze Studio, which itself was financially struggling after releasing a very poorly received reboot of the Syndicate franchise for EA. Overkill offered Starbreeze a deal they couldn't refuse. The brothers were confident that if Starbreeze were to lend them enough money to make a Payday sequel, it would become so successful that it can save both of the studios from their money problems. And Starbreeze had no choice but to cave in. So 2013 saw the official release of Payday 2, building on everything the original game established but making it better and much more polished. The game introduced entirely new features like the stealth approach to heists, a new skill tree system, special perk decks, a significantly larger arsenal of weapons, and an insane amount of customization options to name a few. Although originally struggling for some time, Payday 2 soon became a cult classic, garnering tens of thousands of players, even reaching an all-time high of near 250,000 concurrent players on Steam alone. And it wasn't going to stop there, as the game expanded with a series of cheap DLCs over the years that offered a ton of content for the money and went on to crossover with many franchises. such as John Wick, Hotline Miami, Team Fortress, Goat Simulator, Scarface, Reservoir Dogs, and Point Break to name a few. Payday 2 became a golden goose for its developers, selling over 40 million copies worldwide. While the financial struggles of Overkill seem to have been over, the two brothers had a falling out. Bo was very ambitious about the future of Payday and wanted to go all in to expand the franchise, but Ulf was really burnt out from the hard work. He was tired and wanted to focus on a small project. The two brothers couldn't resolve their differences, and Bo eventually bought Ulf's share of the company. This is where the downfall of the Payday franchise started. While Ulf was the creative mind behind Payday, Bo was more focused on the business side of the franchise. And according to the people who worked with him, he was just too focused on the money. Bo doubled down on his vision of expanding the franchise by announcing Payday Crime War. Developed by Simune Studio, it was going to be a Payday mobile game that was very different from the original. Payday Crime War was set to be a PvP cops and robbers style game where a team of heisters and another of police battle each other, which was very ambitious for a cell phone game at the time. But this seems to be the only thing he has done to expand the Payday franchise, as Bo would go on to make a series of very bad financial decisions. In 2016, Bo handed the Lion Game Lion Studio a huge bag of money and funded the development of Raid World War II, a Payday knockoff game set in the war days. This was a very strange choice since Bo spent the money he could invest in the Payday franchise on a competitor's game. It's speculated that Bo simply funded the project because he was close with the CEO of Lion Game Lion. The only upside is that Raid received mixed to negative reception and didn't live long enough to rival Payday. Bo then went on to spend a ridiculous amount of money on VR projects. The exact amount of money varies from sources, but we do know for a fact that just $10 million was poured into a VR park in Dubai. It's not clear to anyone why Bo was so interested in virtual reality, considering it brought next to no profit for the company, going as far as to release a VR port for Payday 2, which was decently received by the audience. Although some players report game-breaking features that would make a VR user stronger than the average player using a regular controller. Bo would even announce a VR game being in development by Overkill named Storm, of which there's basically no information available except some Reddit posts. But the last nail on the coffin was when Bo purchased the Valhalla game engine to be used on all future Starbreeze games. This turned out to be a complete waste of money, as not only did Valhalla lack many of the necessary tools for video game creation, most of the team were completely unfamiliar with the engine and had no idea how to use it. Despite the problems, the studio started to develop their next game using the Valhalla engine, titled Overkills: The Walking Dead, which was promised to be a 4-player co-op survival experience with an intriguing storyline. But before the team could get comfortable, the problems with Valhalla caught up to them. 2 years down the line, the developers realized they couldn't make the game they wanted on Valhalla and had to scrap everything to start again with Unreal Engine 4. But at the time, unfamiliarity with the game engine was the least of their concerns, as there was simply no clear direction for the development of the game, so naturally, the final product was a disaster. Overkills: The Walking Dead had nothing going for it. The story premise was very poorly written, the mechanics were uncomfortable, the difficulty was ridiculously unforgiving, there was no AI teammate, the online lobbies did not have voice chat, and the levels were riddled with bugs and glitches. Going a layer deeper, the game just didn't have any highlights. There was no driving force to hook the players. It was redundant and repetitive, to say the least, and it didn't get to live long enough to see any improvement. As just 3 months after release, Skybound pulled The Walking Dead's license from Starbreeze, effectively cancelling the game. Overkills: The Walking Dead was pulled from stores and shut down, never to be heard of again. At the same time, Payday Crime War entered its open beta stage and was being tested by the audience. The game was not received very well, being labeled shallow and repetitive, which didn't help because it was struggling to even be developed. since the studio was running out of money. Eventually, Starbreeze had to shelve Payday Crime War indefinitely. It became clear that Bo Anderson doesn't have the necessary skills to lead the studio, and through his strange money spending habits, he has led the team to rock bottom. So on December 3rd of 2018, Bo officially stepped down as the CEO and left the studio, presumably taking the promised Storm VR game with him, since it was never brought up again. That is, if it even existed in the first place. At this point, both of the brothers who originally made Payday were no longer on the team. They have left Starbreeze in a financial crisis with a dying franchise on their hands. An executive with the name of Mikael Niermark had to step in as the new CEO, and he surely had his work cut out for him. Starbreeze soon filed for restructuring, and the team struggled every day to keep itself from bankruptcy. In 2019, the situation became so severe that Starbreeze stopped updating the console versions of Payday 2, which, based on my sources, they didn't even announce until much later. The updates simply stopped coming, and to this day, they haven't resumed. Mikael pushed as much as he could to keep the Payday franchise going. The fact that Payday games are still a thing is largely because of his efforts. But sadly, in 2020, he had to resign for personal reasons and pass the position to Tobias Huagrin. Unfortunately, 1 year later, it was revealed to the public that Mikael had been battling cancer and passed away at the age of 50. Despite his best efforts, the situation at the studio wasn't exactly improving. In the simplest way possible, the team needed a miracle to pull them out of the hole. And if there was one thing they have learned from Bo's time at the office, it's that they didn't need to focus on a brand new IP or try to revive a forgotten franchise or invest in another studio to develop their game. All they needed was to focus on the face of their studio, Payday, that desperately needed a sequel. But things weren't so black and white, as Starbreeze had lost the trust of its fans over the course of years. Payday players were unsure if Starbreeze can deliver a worthy sequel to their beloved franchise. After all, any game Starbreeze had a hand in after Payday 2 was either a wasteland, shut down, or shelved, leaving Payday 2 as their only source of income. And a half-baked Payday game couldn't just be swept under the rug like the others. On top of that, Starbreeze didn't have the funds to produce a sequel either. Funny enough, the team behind Payday found itself in the exact same position they did a decade ago, trying to create a sequel for their successful Payday game, but lacking the funds to do so. And they took a page straight out of the Anderson brothers' book by reaching out to PlayOn, offering them the role of publisher in Payday 3. On January of 2023, Payday 3 was officially announced, and it was received very positively by the audience. Even though the initial trailer didn't show much, there was a visible improvement in graphics and gameplay in comparison to the previous two games. After all, Payday 3 was developed in Unreal Engine 4, making it the very first Payday game that wasn't made on a racing game engine. The Payday team seemed very ambitious for the sequel, even announcing a Payday TV show being in production with the partnership of Stockholm Syndrome Studio. A very fitting name representing people who still play Payday, including me. It's worth mentioning that there is absolutely no information available on this quote-unquote movie studio. While it's true that things were looking up, we know by now when suits get involved, the results are usually very disappointing, and PlayOn was no exception to this rule. As time progressed, Starbreeze released more information about Payday 3, which the fans didn't like very much, as Payday 3 was announced to be always online, meaning the offline audience of the past two games were completely taken out of the equation. While Starbreeze presented a list of reasons as to why the game needs to be online, including an anti-cheat, it was later revealed by the community that Payday 3 was planned to receive microtransactions, also known as Payday credits, making the player base suspect them to be the real reason of Payday 3 being online only. While nowadays microtransactions are very common and can be found in pretty much any online game, the situation is a bit different when it comes to Payday players. as Starbreeze have already tried to include them in Payday 2 back at 2015, only to receive major backlash, resulting in them removing the feature and even apologizing for adding it in the first place, solidifying the idea that it's never going to happen again. September 21st of 2023 came, and right in the middle of the question marks, Payday 3 was officially released, and it was absolutely terrible. If I were to list every small problem with the game, I would need an entirely separate video, but just to mention the icing on the cake for some context. The issue started before you even got to play the game, as the servers couldn't handle the influx of players, leaving everyone either unable to log in or waiting in queue for nearly an hour, only for them to eventually get disconnected mid-game anyway. But if you were one of the lucky few to load in, just on the main menu, you would notice that Payday 3 was missing many of the features that made Payday 2 special. The skill system was changed in favor of a less interesting one, perk decks didn't even exist, the armor system was swapped with a blander design, melee weapons were removed, and the arsenal of guns was comically small. If this first impression didn't convince you to quit the game and you went on to try loading in a heist lobby, you'd be greeted with a total of 8 new heists and 2 legacy heists, which were basically brought back from Payday 2. For comparison, Payday the Heist includes 9 unique heists, so Payday 3 had less original missions when compared to the first game. Whichever one you pick, you would wait for about an hour and find yourself in a game lobby. You heard me right, there was no crime net for Payday 3 when it first came out. You simply picked a job and matchmade with other players. If you try to communicate with your team, you would realize that a game released in 2023 doesn't have voice chat. You may try to plan for the upcoming score, but good luck with that since the pre-planning feature was removed entirely, being replaced with one favor slot for each player, which didn't do the new heists any favor since they were already labeled bland and forgettable by the players. And as I said, this is just the icing on the cake. There are many videos out there that explain in detail everything that was wrong with Payday 3 on launch, including one made by myself. Naturally, the game was met with severe backlash from the community, some of them even being overkill. And the promised Payday TV show was just not spoken about anymore. Not cancelled, just pretending as if it never existed. At the same time, Payday Crime War was taken off the shelf and given to PopReach to be revived. PopReach went on to completely rebrand Payday Crime War, turning it into a very primitive cell phone version of Payday 2, which did next to nothing to lift the shallow label from the game, and Starbreeze couldn't afford to invest any more money into the title. Eventually, Payday Crime War was shut down for good. While Payday 3 was still in a terrible state, Starbreeze took a page out of Bo's book by focusing on yet another title, Project Baxter, a Dungeons & Dragons style co-op game. This announcement infuriated many of the Payday fans, as the sequel they wanted for years was half-baked and then supposedly thrown aside in favor of a game that nobody asked for. All of the heat was placed on the shoulders of Tobias as the CEO, even though some members of the community didn't blame him for the situation of Payday at the time. He still lost his position on March of 2024 and passed the torch to Jürgen Goldner, who became an interim CEO for a short while, although he didn't do anything noteworthy. Simply not bankrupting the company under his leadership itself is an accomplishment when it comes to Starbreeze. Although based on the track record of the previous CEOs, the fanbase did make a joke about Jürgen being just Bo Anderson with a fake mustache. 2 months later, Jürgen handed the position to another interim CEO named Mats Juhl, whom, in an attempt to cut costs after the atrocious performance of Payday 3, decided to shut down the French division of Starbreeze without following the French labor law, causing many people to lose their jobs and leaving 17 lawsuits on the hands of Starbreeze. Can you CEOs stop trying to bankrupt your company for 5 minutes? The entire studio was under major pressure, and Payday 3 was getting crushed underneath all of it.
I just want to raise something with the Payday community that I think is very important for us to say. You can't be a heister and say, you know what, I'll come back in 2 years. Maybe the game is better then. Like, we need you to be here now and support us now if you want there to be a game in 2 years. You know what I mean?
Luckily, before Mats could drive the company to the ground, Adolf Christensen was appointed as the permanent CEO on April of 2025. AK basically walked into a burning building and tried to clean up the mess made by the greater half of the other CEOs before him. As of now, the latest news we have of what decisions he had made is that AK cancelled Project Baxter immediately, putting the focus of developers on Payday 3 only, which is probably the first sane decision a Starbreeze CEO has made. It's worth mentioning that Payday 3 has received major improvements over its lifespan. At a snail pace, that is, of course. Gradually, the server issues were fixed, allowing a high number of players to log in at the same time. The majority of bugs and glitches were patched out. The new matchmaking system was replaced with Payday 2's CrimeNet. A solo game mode was added, allowing the players to complete heists on their own. The health and armor system were reworked, even bringing back the classic Payday 2 armor as an option. While pre-planning didn't make a return, some heists received specific favors available in the game shop. The weapon arsenal was expanded, adding a variety of different weapons for different players. More customization options became available over time. A series of Payday 2 heisters were redesigned and added to Payday 3, and most importantly, new heists were developed, some of them being free to play. With these improvements in place, you might be wondering, did the situation of Payday 3 see any change? The answer is a very grey yes. Payday 3 did manage to pull back some of the frustrated fans and bring in a noticeable number of newcomers, but it's still struggling on the player count, being massively overshadowed by its predecessor Payday 2, which Starbreeze is still finding new ways to monetize in 2026, presenting themselves desperate in the eyes of an average gamer. The biggest mess Payday 3 has to clean up right now is the awful first impression it made. After all, not many people are aware of the improvements if they aren't playing to see them. And Payday 3 still needs a trigger to make some heads turn. A prime example would be what CD Projekt Red did with Cyberpunk 2077, a title that was much bigger than Payday 3, but also made a horrible first impression. After fixing a great deal of the bugs and glitches, CD Projekt Red released Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which, aside from being a successful show, pulled people back to the game to see how much it has improved. And Starbreeze seemed to have taken the live-action Payday off the shelf, as Vice Studios is adapting the franchise for a TV show, which can have a similar effect on Payday 3. Given the fact that unlike the first two installments, Payday 3 has active competitions such as Crime Boss Rocky City or currently in development by Ulf Anderson himself, Den of Wolves, we may see updates come in at a faster pace. There are lots of theories, but more than them, there are questions. How will the future of Payday 3 look like? Will it become a wasteland and eventually shut down? Will Starbreeze go out of business and sell the IP to another studio? Or can the franchise grow and reach the level of glory its predecessors did? I would say the future is looking bright for Payday. But if there's one thing I learned from researching this documentary, it's that the Payday team is always one bad decision away from the end. If you enjoy the content and want to support the channel, you can join my channel membership or become a Patreon member and get early access to videos, exclusive content, behind the scene updates, and other extra perks. Every contribution helps me keep creating and improving the content consistently. Thank you to everyone who watches, likes, comments, and is part of the community. This video was created with support from the Payday Discord server, especially 3 members who played a major role in the research process. A huge thank you to everyone who contributed and helped make this project possible.